So welcome everybody to episode 10 of the White Shark Interest Group podcast. We are Facebook's largest White Shark specific group. We are just edging, we are about 10 members away from 48,000 members. So by the time you hear this, we're probably already over 48,000. And we really appreciate all the discussion and the debates that we have inside the group. So if you're not a member and you're listening to this podcast, please head over to Facebook and search the White Shark Interest Group. You will find us to join and you'll be asked a question. And if it is because you've heard this podcast and you're not a member, please give us a shout out and tell us that you heard the podcast and you want to join. Our motto is to educate, conserve and protect great white sharks. And we do that through all our members having healthy debate and discussion on all manner of topics. There's also videos and pictures that you might want to see when you join there. So please head over if you're not a member. Just before we get started, I'd like to give a couple of shout outs if I can. Firstly, to one of our members, Sean Marie McDonald, who's been a massive supporter of our podcast so far and did lots of posts with almost like a mini review of each episode, which cannot thank you enough. Your insight and your feedback is so valuable to us as admins who put this stuff together. So thank you so much. Also to Robbie Perth, clearly a fan of the podcast. And Robbie, just thank you so much for your feedback. It really does mean a lot when we put some time and effort into here to know that there's an audience out there and people do actually want to listen to the guests that we've got and the topics that we cover. So thank you so much, Robbie, for that as well. Now, normally about this time, I would say who we've got on the show today. So I'm joined today, firstly, by our founder, Dirk Schmidt.
Hi, everybody.
And I normally then say what guest that we're going to have or what the topic of conversation is, but Dirk is turning the tables today and flipping it on me because I believe, Dirk, that we want to talk about a little film I made.
I'm really honored to actually turn the tables today on you and be on the other side of the microphone, literally.
It's very strange.
It is, isn't it? And interview Ricardo Lacombe, the director and producer of the Great White Shark Legend, which you produced in 2014. Just a bit about your legend. I mean, you've produced several films. I think your latest one is Unit 11, one of your earlier ones, The Jester's Tale, in which you've also acted. You're a composer, you compose music. You're a truly gifted individual, Ricardo. So, we're really honored not only to have you as part of the admin team, but also that you produced the intro for the White Shark group as well, which is really, really awesome. So thank you very much for that as well.
I appreciate that, Dirk. That little intro video, by the way, is one I'm really super proud of that, and we seem to have quite a lot of people viewing it. So if anybody hasn't seen it, it's in the group, or you can search on YouTube. I do all kinds of things. You're right, and I really appreciate those words. It's very kind of you.
You deserve credit. I mean, because it's just visible. It's there, and also the work that you've done for sharks is really amazing. But coming to sharks, living in the UK and being literally landborn, I would assume. How did you get into sharks in the first place, let alone white sharks? What got you into or interested into sharks?
I've always had an interest in sharks. I mean, growing up, it's never been something that I've been totally focused on. But I mean, every kid growing up sees Jaws. I mean, I'm the age, as many of us are, that was one of our first introductions to sharks. And we've said that many times. And it's only looking back now that I do remember that was my first introduction to sharks. I'm from the UK, but I grew up in Canada. One of the first memories I have is being in a drive-in theatre in Canada in the back of a station wagon car watching Jaws. Vague memories of it, certain images and things. I mean, why the hell my parents were letting me watch Jaws when I was about 3-4 years old? I've no idea. But hey, that's what I remember. I remember the shark and, we look at it now as a rubber shark, but that stuck with me. So I've always had that interest in sharks. And then, you go through school and you occasionally see a book that's got, something about sharks and rays and so on, and you have an interest. But I was never really that focused on it because, as we've talked about before and on some of the other episodes, I had this horrendous fear of water. Open water, just the idea of being out at sea just terrified me to the point, you go to the beach as a kid and it's like, I'm not going past my ankles because I'm absolutely petrified of water. And I think sharks is probably in the background of that somewhere. The fear of don't know what's under the water, of all the things that might be under the water. The last thing you want to encounter, is a shark. I guess particularly a great white shark. But so it was kind of this, born of a you get excited about your fear, I guess. You don't want to go and face your fear, especially at that younger age. But just the idea of being in the water and something could be there, it's like a horror film. Everybody likes being scared sometimes. So I think it was probably born of that originally. But to focus on sharks specifically, and then I suppose I'm getting ahead of myself here. I spent a lot of time in my sort of early 20s being a session musician and recording musician. And it was only by chance I got into filmmaking. And then it was only by chance from filmmaking I actually did anything with sharks. So it was a very kind of long process to end up where I find myself out on a boat in South Africa pointing my camera at great white sharks breaching.
But what got you into the white shark world as such? I mean, what compelled you, if I can say that? I mean, your fear of open water, and what compelled you is to go out with Rob Lawrence to Seal Island, which is the middle of False Bay. It's a really long swim back to land. So what kind of made you overcome your fear in a way and your interest in white sharks that compelled you to get out there?
Well, that was my wife. That was Rachel. We'd been together for a while and we were looking at places we were going to go on vacation. And suddenly she just said, why don't we go shark cage diving? And instantly it was just like, absolutely, let's do it.
Yeah.
I don't know why. We just thought, let's go do that. So initially, it's because we went out as tourists. We wanted to go to South Africa. I knew nothing about cage diving. I knew very little about the False Bay area. I'd seen Shark Week, I'd seen Air Jaws and those kind of shows, so I was aware of breaching. I'd seen some of the images, but I didn't really know the area. I didn't really know the sort of topic so much. And it was only from going out as a tourist we said, let's go do that. That sounds like a awesome idea for a vacation. We didn't know also that meant in South Africa you've got to go in the winter because that was shark season.
Yeah.
So we thought we were going to go out to South Africa and it'll be all these like nice beaches and hanging out on the harbour and stuff. And actually, no, it's those massive winds and the rain and and freezing cold water, as you'll know, obviously. So we went out as tourists. I'd been filmmaking for quite a while and and earning commissions and working in that industry along with many other industries that I do some work in. But that was something that I was really working on at that time. So I took my camera out, sort of above average camera. We got a recommendation for Rob Lawrence's company for African Shark Eco Charters, which thank goodness we did, because if you want to go out and see them, it was like best of the best. I mean, we really landed lucky getting on that boat. So we ended up in South Africa. I'd got a camera. I think to have an interest in filming sharks, I'd taken the camera anyway, because I thought I'm going to, if it's going to do like a home video, let's at least make it decent quality. And I ended up making a little film after we'd shot out there. I look back on it now, it's terrible because I'm hyping up shark breaches. The only breach we saw was kind of like just the top of the head of the shark coming out of the water, but it was like we'd never seen that before, so that was stunning. We didn't see any big Polaris breaches or anything like that going on that first trip. Yeah. What really got me hooked was firstly the realization when we saw our first white shark. When we saw it rising up from the deep. Rob had put the boat out near the island and we were just waiting for the sharks to turn up and just saw this white belly of a great white shark rising up just really slowly. Wasn't coming for decoys, wasn't coming for baits. It was just swimming up to the surface, kind of like almost backwards, where it's just its white belly that you're looking at and you could see the mouth. And just within those few seconds, realizing we'd just been completely lied to by the media. It's hard to describe. You'll know this because you've seen this, and anyone who's fortunate to have been out there and seen it, many of our members have, you'll know. You just know in a second, this is not what Shark Week told me these creatures were about. Yeah. That little spark, there's very few moments in life, I think, where I've had some kind of obvious realization that something has changed in life, and that was one of them. It was an instant it was a gut feeling and a very sort of like primal sort of connection to the creature that that's a great white shark. That's one of the largest predators on the planet, and one of the most misunderstood animals, and I'm just staring at one coming out of the water and I've got a camera in my hand, so it's a natural reaction, point the camera and film that thing. And I ended up putting this little film together. I'm not even going to say the name of it because it's really embarrassing. It's really old and it's just some home video footage, and we didn't even have proper like underwater cameras at that time. We just had like the little sort of point and shoot cameras, and it looks quite poor, but I'd done it. And what I did is I actually sent that to Rob and Karen at their company afterwards and said, hey, I was out there. We did about 3 or 4 days with them rather than just the 1 day trip. So we got a good experience of what that was like. His crew at the time had people like Brandon Kilbride, who we've had on one of our episodes now, and bizarrely enough lives here in the UK, and he's even coming around for lunch tomorrow, which is I haven't seen him for years. So he was on the boat, and Rob's crew were a big part in kind of getting us excited about sharks. But I remember I put this little film and I sent it to Rob and Karen and said, if you want to use any of this footage on your website, or you want to, I noticed they didn't really have much video out there, feel free to use it. And then they actually came back to me and said the way I'd portrayed sharks in this little film, maybe I will put a link up for it, I don't know, we'll see. But the way I'd portrayed sharks was very different.
Yeah.
I'd obviously seen something different in White Shark to what your normal media presentation was, and thought, I'll try and capture that. So there was no Jaws music, there was no big teeth, there was no drama. We'd got a fantastic seal and sharks like predation activity and a chase going on, which was fantastic. A lot of splashing on the surface and the seal outrunning the shark. But they just said I'd sort of portrayed it in the edit afterwards in a very different way, the way that they want people to see sharks. So would I mind doing some promotional work for them? Appreciate this is quite a long story, but what it came down to is I absolutely said, of course I will. The chance to use your professional talents and for something like that. But I had the problem that I'd only got a limited amount of footage from what I'd shot. And Karen actually said, "Oh, Rob's got a box full of tapes that he's been shooting for years. He's always had a camera and he's always just been filming things out on the boat. We can send you the tapes." I mean, I'm frothing at the mouth at this point. It's like Rob Lawrence is going to send me a box of about 10 years worth of tapes of white shark activity. Are you kidding? They actually sent me this box over. I've still got it here because I look after it for them. And it was about 50 hours of breach activity and predations. And I mean, everything that that experience of going out in false bait. I'd got 50 hours of it on tape.
Wow.
I know.
It's a cousin.
That's cuz. Come on.
Oh, look at that gash on his head.
Oh! Stop!
I've still got all that footage, and it's preserved. Some of it's older footage, but it doesn't matter because it still looks fantastic. I've sort of HD upscaled some of it till I'm sat on this footage that I just had to use. And when we ended up then making a documentary, I got obviously tons of archive footage there. But Rob Lawrence, 50 hours worth of vintage shark material from False Bay. I was like a kid in a candy store, I was hooked. I was hooked at that point.
So Ricardo, but then coming to when you actually made the movie. So just before I'm going to I'd like to ask you, what made you want to make the movie, and why did you choose the title Great White Legend?
Titles are always a funny one. I knew it had to have the word Great White Shark in there somewhere, because I work in that industry. You need something that piques some interest. If I'd come up with some really ambiguous, title that meant something to me, but it didn't say the word shark in it, you're just not going to get people's attention, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. And I didn't want something, Great White Shark Killer, Great White Shark Teeth. It wasn't. I wanted something that was a bit of an image. And the thing that stuck and where that title came from was that, and I'll get to a minute about how we then came to actually want to make a film. But in terms of the title, you touched on this when we interviewed you for this film. The word was primal. You said it's a very, like Seal Island is a very primal area. And this creature is, the white sharks is millions of years of evolution. And it's something that just goes back in history forever, no matter all the differences in society and the way human beings have evolved and changed our life in such a short space of time. In the scheme of things, great white sharks have been there for millions of years and pretty much unchanged in that time. So these things are kind of almost watching us in slow motion, just there in slow motion. We just pinged on the map a few hundred years ago and started doing what we do as humans.
Right.
But I wanted something that was about, it was the kind of myths about white sharks. You look back in history and you look back at all those old, seafarers' drawings and stories of these ocean monsters that you can now probably put down and say they were probably talking about white sharks at that point. It was that kind of sense of an age of these legends and myth that humans have had about white sharks for so long. And then seeing Rob, because I didn't have children at the time, but with Rob, so he's out there and he's interacting with white sharks on a daily basis, and he's got young children. So I really wanted to kind of capture something about how, for all the history of man's interactions with white sharks and all the legends and tales and myths that we've ever been told about, and we've actually got an opportunity particularly with children and the younger generation, to actually write some new tales and legends and myths. So where we used to talk about it was the seafarers talking about these monsters, and to a degree that is exactly what Shark Week still tries to sell us on. Nothing much has changed in that sense. We've just do it on HD 4K video now instead of old pictures of, seafaring tales.
Right.
But with the younger generation, we've got a chance to actually write something new and tell a different story. And that was the whole crux of the film. And that's why we opened it with Rob staring out to sea, and we closed it with Rob and his children staring out to sea. And the whole end piece of the film is all about what tale do we want to tell? What legends?
Yeah.
What's the time now, and how we look at white sharks now? How is that going to get looked at in 300 years' time? The same the way that we look back 300 years and see all the tales of monsters.
Right.
So that's really where the title came from. We'd heard enough myths, tales, and legends about great white sharks. So we decided to travel back to South Africa, cameras in hand, and with the help of some of the most knowledgeable people in the area, we would dispel those myths, tell a new tale about great whites, and define a new legend for future generations.
And you also had interviewed quite a few people in the shark world, which gave their perception of the shark and sharks in general. What is the message that you wanted to portray in the movie?
Well, originally it was, can we just do whatever Shark Week is not doing? It really was an antithesis of Shark Week, because I was so pissed off that I'd been lied to by the media. I'd never been out and seen white sharks before. I was supremely pissed that I'd just been fed a story and an image that just was not true.
Yeah.
As much as all those shows are fascinating and entertaining, just they had no message to them. Rarely had a message. Even though the video looked exciting and the images were stunning. But you never got what you got in books on film. It was still sensationalized. So having been out there and seen an experience which instantly told you that all that kind of Shark Week nonsense is pretty much a lie, or it's about 1% of a shark's behavior, is what you see on a lot of those shows. That transformative experience of going out on that kind of cage diving experience and overturning how you viewed sharks. Is there any way to capture that in a film that is also then not boring?
Mm-hmm.
Because no one wants to hear that story. No one wants to hear that I went out to Seal Island and there's sharks predating everywhere and there was no teeth. It wasn't all about blood and there was no drama and I didn't hear the Jaws music. Who wants that story?
Right.
That's not what you want to watch on a film, huh? It was the antithesis of that, and the fact that Rob and Karen had said, look, the way you've presented sharks here, white sharks, is very different. It was like, okay, can we do more with that, I wonder?
Yeah, and I think you do that brilliantly. I mean, it comes across. I mean, it's really the misunderstood predator. I mean, even with the advent of Jaws, and I think I said this many times. It really put the white shark into the limelight, and it became literally an iconic species that everybody used to love to hate, and the media, to a large extent, still hates the white shark. Well, they actually love the white shark because it sells headlines. Coming back to Jaws, and what are your first emotions when you? I know you described it generally when you saw your first white shark rolling up to the surface, but what was your first emotion when you saw it underwater, when you went into the cage?
Yeah.
Describe how you felt about it and describe what flooded through your brain in terms of how you felt, your emotions, and just the whole visual aspect that you were being presented.
It's a really interesting again, an evolution of how we felt, because initially we were on top of the boat, we've anchored up, we'd seen some breaches and things in the distance, we'd seen a few splashes, but we'd not seen a white shark. So then we see this white shark rising up. And I instantly turned to Rachel. Rachel, by the way, she's not joining us today because we have this thing called children now, but Rachel very much was involved in writing and producing and filming Great White Shark Legend. She turned to me and I turned to her as soon as we saw the shark rising up and said, let's get suited up. I've got to get in that cage. I need to go and see that underwater. I need to get in their world and see this. And this is what cage diving done right can give you, because we got suited up, we get in the water, you're still at that time, it's like, what am I going to see here? I'm actually getting in the water now. There's just me and this few metal bars, and you've said this before, if that shark wanted to get in that cage, it would get in that cage. And you've told yourself you're in this nice safe cage, but so we get in the water. I wasn't a scuba diver either. I mean, Rob's company Fortunate give you the feed from the top, from the tanks, so you don't have to go with the full scuba gear on. You get the hooker system, but you can actually stay underwater as opposed to just holding your breath. So we're under the water. First thing I remember is just how peaceful it was.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in the cage, me and Rachel. I'm having a bit of trouble with the breathing equipment and the water's going up my nose a little bit. So I'm trying to fight that. But the whole time I'm just thinking, this is so serene. This is so peaceful. Just got the noise of the bubbles in my ears, and there's just fish everywhere. And it's just, this is incredible. I remember the water that day was really kind of almost like a purple colour, like purpley green colour. The visibility wasn't great because it isn't a spot for great visibility. I'm just kind of there, just enjoying the this idea that I'm now underwater. This is a guy who, 5 hours before was absolutely bricking myself about the idea of even being out on a boat on the water. Now I'm in a cage, and I know the sharks in the water because we've seen some. So I'm there with Rachel, and we're kind of in this 2-man cage. And then I turned to Rachel at one point, and I saw her eyes widening, and she was pointing behind me. I mean, it's almost comical. It's almost a joke. She's like, just eyes wide and pointing. And I turned to the right. I'm in the right-hand side of the cage, and I turned to my right just in time to see this probably about a 4-meter white shark just heading straight towards the cage, and not in a you see those horrible sort of bad bait technique videos where they've purposely tried to ram sharks into the cage. It wasn't like that. It was just swimming towards the cage, and it swam so close to I literally turned around and found that its nose was just pushing through the little gap in the cage. It wasn't rammed. It wasn't trying to get in. It was just on its way on like a turn. But it just happened to get that close to the cage that its nose was just popping into the little viewing port. And I'm literally 1 meter from a shark's nose. And my heart's just going crazy. I mean, I wasn't particularly the fittest of guys, and not still am. So it's like, please don't have a heart attack. My heart's just going crazy, and I can feel Rachel grabbing my hand, and I'm like, there's a great white shark 1 meter from my face, and I'm staring right down its mouth. I can see down its mouth. This is insane. This is crazy, But the whole time while that's happening, I'm just thinking how peaceful and serene it is, how quiet it is. And the shark just did its little turn, swam past the front of the cage. And from then on, for about 15, 20 minutes on that first dive, was just, Rachel and I tapping each other and pointing to where you see the next shark coming in. Here comes one behind you, and here's a shark dived out of the way because here comes a bigger shark. And these were probably peak times for cage diving. In that area. There were players around the boat, and we just spent 20 minutes, half an hour on that first dive. Just absolutely, I can't describe a sense of calm, to be honest, Dirk. You probably experienced this, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Just felt calm.
I mean, I love seeing sharks generally, but the great whites just have a certain presence around them. It's just that they literally, at that area, they're the lord of the seas, and it's just the supreme predator. And if it wanted to get you, it would get you, but it doesn't. I mean, you're not on its menu. And so I wanted to ask you, how did you feel about cage diving? I mean, you obviously spent some time in the cage. Rob runs a very good operation with regarding to bringing sharks in and making sure that people can see them. But how do you feel about cage diving? Because it's always a bit of a controversial topic. But in as such, as a filmmaker and as having seen these sharks in real life, what are your feelings about cage diving?
Before going out there, I had no experience of any controversy around cage diving because I wasn't really experienced in the white shark world. I mean, much of that, to be fair, has actually come from being a member and then admin of your group. So my experience at the time, I didn't know that there was any real controversy around it. I did have a perception before that it was going to be all the buckets of blood. It'd be, Brody character on the back of the orca saying, chum some of this shit and throwing all the blood and the liver in the water. So that's kind of perception I thought it was going to be. So I was really pleasantly surprised to see just how professional and low impact it was. But I didn't know that there was anyone had an issue with it. I was more concentrated at the time, to be fair, on the safety aspect of concentrating on what these guys who clearly were experienced, Rob and his crew, how they looked after guests on the boat and how they were extremely knowledgeable and the amount, just while you're waiting for sharks to turn up, the amount of education that you get from, a quiet hour with people like Brandon and Rob and his crew, and Welly, who was the bait guy, just talking to them and hanging on the boat was just that experience alone. Had I not seen a shark and got in the water, I don't think I would have been disappointed that day because it was education about sharks.
Okay, you also want to watch out for seals.
Seals and birds is what I'm looking for.
Seals and birds are what you're looking for, because they're the telltale signs. Our sight's a lot better than ours.
I've learned a lot from him the last three and a half years. So a lot of just shark-related things, but every day I'm pretty much learning something new from him.
He's probably going to be staying a little bit deeper. We'll try and get him up on the surface, but we've picked him up fairly quickly. Up top is probably going to be one of your better viewing spots when he arrives.
Interestingly, just on a safety aspect and how cage diving works, by the way, I was trying to get out of the cage, and I don't know if I've told this story before, but so I was getting out of the cage, and it was my first dive ever. I was very inexperienced, and I'd not listened properly. I guess I was too excited, but I was getting out of the cage the wrong way. So obviously what you should do is maybe have your back to the boat and lift yourself up, and they'll help you get onto the side of the boat or the other way around. So they'd flip the lid on the cage, and I was getting out the side of the cage. So I'd kind of perch my backside on the side of a cage with my back to the open water. So I'd not got the cage lid, I'd not got the boat, and I started falling backwards.
Oh dear.
So, and I was like, I'm like, okay, in an instant, I'm like, I'm in false bait. I've just been under the water. I've seen probably about 4 or 5 great white sharks. I'm now falling backwards out of the cage, and I've realized the mistake I've made. I've not done it correctly. And here's how safety and a good operator works. As I was doing that, Wellington, who's one of the guys on Rob's crew, I think he's still on Rob's crew.
Yeah, I think he is, yeah.
Expert bait handler, and does it very, very consciously of not to negatively impact the sharks. So anyway, Welly had seen what was happening. And there's this guy, with his fat ass falling out of a cage to the open water. And he actually reached over and grabbed my weight belt that was around my waist and held on to me while I could get my hands onto the side of the cage.
Wow.
So I held there as quick as I could and tried to pull myself back up, which I did. They'd got me. They'd seen this happening, 10 minutes before it was even going to happen. They were obviously seeing this guy's falling. So he grabbed me, helped me up onto the boat. I turned around the right way, got onto the boat. Well, kind of flopped onto the boat like a fish, to be honest. At which point, Brandon, who was working on the boat at the time, started clapping me and cheering and making a good joke about the fact that... And then Welly tapped me on the arm and he went, look, and he pointed, and I turned round, and right about where I was about to fall, there you go. There's a 4.5 meter great white shark just cruising past.
Yeah.
And while I know that I probably would have been fine, my head had nearly touched the water when I fell backwards. So I'm just like, on the one hand, that I should be frightened about that. I should have been terrified about the fact that my head's just nearly falling in the water, in open water, in False Bay, a great white shark hotspot. But no, the crew had just done everything they needed to do and got me safe and no issues whatsoever. But I still wasn't scared.
Yeah.
The fear had just gone from that whole experience. And the only reason I mention that is exactly that. If you recount that tale to someone who's never been shark diving, they'd think, holy cow.
Yeah.
You nearly fell in the water.
Shark infested.
In False Bay.
Yeah.
Shark infested, yes. And before anybody starts commenting below about shark infested, yes, we know it's not shark infested water. It's just that's where they live. We know this. It was that contrast again that I'm here in the shark hotspot where you see breaching and predation behavior like nowhere else on the planet. And I've just nearly fallen in the water, but the fear was just not there. It had gone. Mm-hmm. And still to this day, there's no fear with that. So that whole sort of range of emotions about what cage diving was just always felt like a safe thing. Now, at that time, I'd not seen any poor operators. I've since seen many and heard many experiences of some poor operators out there, which is why, again, I'm just so thankful that we got the nod from somewhere. Rachel got a recommendation that this guy, Rob Lawrence, is the guy to go with. And it could have been a very different experience, I guess, but, it's turned out to be life-changing.
When they come back, they rave about this, the experiences, and they rave about the shark. And this is so wonderful to see how these people actually change their whole mindset and their whole attitude towards sharks after they've been exposed to them.
It was unbelievable.
Definitely a worthwhile experience. I have to say that. Yeah.
What did you see?
Saw a big girthy shark just swimming right on by.
Yeah, he was a massive guy, just circling around, cruising. Didn't look like he minded our company too much.
Something you'd do again?
I'd do it every day if I could. Definitely.
Don't get many sharks in Leeds.
No. It was awesome. It shook us so hard.
Do you like what you see on TV?
It's much better.
No, it's fine. Totally alright.
That was so cool.
Scary?
Not really.
Yeah.
No?
Nah, it was just checking us out.
Yeah, he was kind of just cruising around.
Yeah, there was one moment where it got this close to the cage and it was just looking right at us and just cruised right on by.
Yeah, no, it got pretty close, but that was definitely a spectacle.
Saw loads of sharks, big sharks as well. So yeah, fantastic. Loved it. Overall, fantastic. Everyone should do it. I would do this every day.
it's huge. It's absolutely massive.
The water's pretty murky, so you can't really see it until it's like right there. So you'll just be looking out and see nothing, and all of a sudden there's a shark right in your face.
Crazy. You do it again?
Yeah,
We're getting in 5 minutes.
I'm gonna go back in. Yeah.
So would you say that you, after your experience with the cage, did it materially change your perceptions about white sharks, or did you really have a changed perception before you actually even went out there?
Oh, it totally changed my perception. Again, it was that the media's lied to me. It was all a lie. I mean, you know that some of the films, you know, Jaws and hammy Hollywood films like the Deep Blue Sea ones, you know they're selling that particular image just for ticket sales and audiences. But it genuinely did, because other than that, the other information that I had at that time was, you know, you see the old vintage pictures of shark bites.
Yeah.
You know, everyone sees the damaged surfboard or the, you know, picture of Rodney Fox with the scars and things. And that was a perception that I still held at that time.
Yeah.
So it 100% turned that around. And that's where I think the hook came of, because I'd then come away and I'd put this footage together and I wanted to sell white sharks on this little short film, you know, how that was basically just like a glorified home video. I wanted to try and capture that, and I thought I did. And Rob and Karen obviously jumped on that and said, this guy's, you know, selling it the right way. And then when I started doing some promotional work for them and, you know, adverts for their business, it was always with a view of, don't do the hammy music, don't do the drama, don't do the sensationalism. And can we keep selling that image?
Yeah.
That turnaround on how I saw white sharks carried on into 2 or 3, 4 sort of promotional pieces for them. And it was while doing those that I kept going back and talking to Karen particularly about, could we do something else here? Could we take this a step further and try and sell that image that we knew was the truth about white sharks, about how they really behaved, and especially in that area, because that was our experience. We'd seen a tourist experience. What was the reality of it? What's it actually like to be there day in, day out and live and work in that area? So what I ended up doing is essentially pitching that to Rob and Karen of like, would you guys be up for backing a documentary? You know, a feature documentary, let's go outside of, let's spend our time to tell a story and the experience. Would you be interested in getting involved with that and sharing your experience, but also backing it and help us, you know, produce this? I'd worked on everything from some very high profile corporate video work, and I'd done my own sort of film work and helped with a lot of independent filmmakers. Certainly nothing sort of fancy, but, you know, we told stories and I knew how to put work together and got paid for it. So I thought, I can do this. I could sell that story. I'm sure I can. So we went to Romcon. They were instantly, well, what we actually did, and I've still got the video of this, Rachel and I started looking at all the topics we'd wanted to get into around white sharks and what was the story in each one. So surfing, how do surfers think about shark? Cage diving, why some people got an issue with cage diving? What's baiting and chumming all about? What are the kids being taught in the area? You know, what are the less privileged people who don't get to go out on a shark boat but live around that area on the doorstep of white shark? What's the truth of how they see sharks? And we started pulling all these topics together, and literally where we were living at the time, in my office was in an attic area. Literally we were post-it noting on the wall, putting the little post-it notes up with all the ideas that we had. And I've still got it on video, because what I ended up doing was structuring what I thought was a narrative to a documentary. Because there's a bit of a myth around documentaries that, well, you just pick a camera up and you just go film stuff and whatever you get, and you make a film out of it. And it couldn't be further from the truth. I'd actually seen, there's a surfing documentary about big waves called Riding Giants.
Yes.
I'm not sure if you've seen that.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Fantastic documentary. In the days of physical DVD media, which we don't get much anymore, it had the director's commentary on the disc. And the guy who made that, you know, a very experienced, award-winning documentary maker, actually talked about his process for the film, which was having a script, if you like, having a story and a narrative idea, and then building your interviews and your questions around that. So we noted this entire story, if you like, and all these sort of subcategories and, you know, and sub-narratives on Post-it notes, and filled this wall up. Rachel videoed me walking through that so I could send it to Rob and Cara and say, this is what I think this film should be. This is how you can sell a positive image of great white sharks in an interesting way with a narrative. And I just walked through that entire story on Post-it notes, on video, and told them what the story would be, and instantly got the comeback from them of, let's do this. Let's absolutely do this. What do you need from us? I'm like, well, I need time on your boat. Ideally, not paying for it, because that would be really expensive.
Yeah.
And they were absolutely on board with that, and that's kind of where that seed took off from. And then obviously we started looking for people that we could talk to, and who's in the know, and what kind of people do we want to speak to, and that's where the different sort of the interviewees came in, including yourself. And I still don't remember exactly how that happened. I think it might be Rob or Corin said you need to talk to Dirk.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I used to live not far away from Rob and Corin. I mean, in Simonstown, so it was just I was naturally drawn to White Sharks. Yeah. Anyway, if you were to make another words, are you planning to do a sequel?
Yes. 100%. So here's the thing. Let me backtrack a little bit. The thing is with that film, it was all about getting the right people. Okay, we've got the topics and we've got some footage, and we know where we can go and shoot, and we can get the budget and the backing we need to go and actually be there with some cameras. But we needed the people, and that was absolutely key to it. So obviously getting yourself was fantastic, because I'd seen your photography, and then obviously I knew you were a writer. I'm not sure how long your second book had been out by that time.
Yeah, you published Great White Shark Legend in 2014, I think it was, and my book had been about 2 years, maybe 3 years before that. So it was not too long. I did a lot of work with Rob. I spent nearly 8 years going out to do shark photography with Rob, doing the season and so forth. So, I spent a lot of time.
Rob or Corin had said you need to, if you want to talk to a guy about sharks, then here's the guy. And then obviously we'd seen your book, and it's like, if we can get time sat with you, I just don't know how it came about. It was all a bit of a blur. I don't remember. It was just like, okay, this guy's in, and we're going to set it up.
I was living in the USA by then, and so I actually flew back for the interview, and I had some other stuff to do, but I purposely came down to be with you guys in Rob's shop when we did the interview.
That is insane. Okay, you had other things to do, but you fly. I'll just fly from the States and come and speak to these guys who I've never heard of, who are making this film. I don't know what it's about, but it's about sharks.
Absolutely,
that's crazy.
Well, it's I think it's worthwhile. I mean, it's, and look at the end product as well. It's an awesome documentary on sharks and telling the real story. And that's what I've always been about, is telling the real story about great whites, that they're not these killers. And besides obviously Rob and other people, you were so akin to the feeling or the emotions that I wanted to share, in terms of these sharks are misunderstood. So I think it was an easy decision.
Well, I guess, but I think this is where from like seeing your book. I mean, if you've not read Dirk's second book, which is the Magnificent, Mysterious, and Misunderstood White Sharks book, it's available still. It's a must. It's a must shark book. Massively underrated, because it should be in everybody's library.
Thank you.
Reading that book and the way you'd approached it, again, yeah, it was an easy fit, because here's a guy who's not only photographing sharks in the right way, but he's portraying them in the right way and writing about them in the right way. So when Rob O'Carron said that, you'd be willing to do that, that was like, okay, bingo. There's someone, because this film was all going to be about people and the people involved with sharks, not just about sharks. Yep. We didn't have tons of fancy equipment to go out there and make a glossy, it needed to be a very kind of down-to-earth, rooted documentary about the people's involvement with sharks, not just about sharks. So I read your book, it's like this, yes, 100%. If we can talk to Dirk, that's great. Obviously, Rob was going to be interviewed, which is just fantastic, and his crew, really great guy called Gary Carstens, who just absolutely just brings the boat alive in the same way that Brandon used to, really high energy, educational guy about sharks. And then we started looking around who else we'd want to talk to. I had this idea that we'd want to talk to children in the area, in the Cape area, about what they're taught in school. And Karen did a fantastic job. She lined us a day up where we literally just drove round for a day with people she'd put together who she knew, who were willing to kind of stick their kids in front of the cameras and let us talk about sharks. And we met, the kids were just amazing. I mean, the energy and the way they talked about ecosystems and how we need to protect sharks, and how they're so excited about wanting to see sharks and getting cages when they're older, was just like, that became such a good part of the book.
And do you know that there's not many sharks left in the world now?
Yes, because they use their fins as fin soup, and they just chuck the left of the body in the sea.
And what do you think about that?
I think it's very sad. And also, I didn't tell you that a great white can swim to Australia from here and back. Some great whites, because they put a monitor thing, the people that do want to know about that, and see how far they swim.
Tag.
Yeah.
When the shark kills,
the blood goes out and some meat, a little bit of meat float away, and the bird just swoops down from the island and picks them up.
Would you live on the island?
Nope.
Why not?
Stink.
Can you tell us why the island stinks?
Hold on the poo.
Whose poo is it?
Seals.
And what do you think about people killing sharks?
I think it's really cruel.
So why is that? Why do you think it's cruel?
Well, it's basically damaging our ecological system. Some people are worried because if there are too many, because if there are not enough sharks, there'll be too many seals, and if there are too many seals, there won't be enough like fish and.
So why do you want them here? Why do you think it's important to protect?
Because it's gonna it's gonna ruin the ecosystem. Because it's like the whole food chain. If they're at the top of the log, and then if they die, then it's gonna overpopulate the other fish, and then it's just gonna go all wrong.
I think people who don't like sharks just don't understand them well. I mean, because sharks are actually not that bad. Some sharks, like a whale shark, they don't eat people, they eat krill and stuff. So I don't think they actually really understand sharks if they hate them.
And then we got Alison Kock as well, who rarely does interviews, to be fair. And I'm still kind of honored we got time with her, but she wanted to ask us a lot of questions about what we were making. And we went for coffee with Alison, and she wanted to suss us out and see what we were about and what we were making. And again, I don't quite remember of how we got in touch with her, but we did, and we reached out. And even once we got out there, we didn't know if we were going to speak to her. But then she said, "Can I meet you?" And we met in one of the little coffee shops in Simonstown and talked over the film. And I think because I said that what I wanted to make was just the complete antithesis of what you see on Shark Week, and I think maybe she'd been burned a little in media before, or was used to doing very little bite-sized soundbite interviews after shark incidents had happened, and I could see why she was wary.
Yeah.
I think the fear, what we need to recognize is that fear is not a bad thing. Fear is a survival instinct for us. I think fear is healthy. I think that what we need to get over is those knee-jerk reactions and the sensational approach to dealing with that fear. I actually asked Sylvia Earle recently in a presentation, how do you keep the hope going? How do you keep the positiveness going? And she said, you just have to recognize all these small pieces of change, of kids seeing the ocean for the first time and enjoying the ocean, and this impacting their lives positively. You have to really recognize these pieces of hope, and you have to keep going, because the alternative is not doing anything. And for me, that's actually not an alternative worth considering. So you have to just keep going.
But we managed to get a couple of hours there, which again, a real contrast of your input and ideas. Her from a very sort of scientific study background, being involved with shark spotters and so on. Rob, whose knowledge is just second to none. His crew working out there every day. Suddenly, it's like we've got all these people involved. And these people are the people that are going to tell the story. So we've got the narrative laid out, and we've got the people lining up. We just need to ask the right questions that around all those different areas in the narrative, and we'll fit it together later. To answer your question about a sequel, one of the biggest responses we got from Great White Shark Legend was a little 10-minute segment where we're interviewing children about how they see sharks. Out of all the comments I ever get about that film, because again, it's not, it's an older film now, so I cringe slightly at how it was shot. I could have done that better with modern technology, but this was 2013, so it was like you had what you had at the time. We didn't have a whole host of money. It was a very grassroots, down-to-earth documentary. But this 10-minute section about interviewing children about how they see sharks is the thing that I've had more response to, I think, than anything else in that film. The shark personalities, which were very rarely talked about at that time, I think that's more popular now as a topic, and how children were educated about sharks, especially in an area where they go swimming in the waters where sharks are. So in terms of a sequel, I absolutely have something in mind to go out there and follow up on that aspect around how children perceive white sharks and what the future generation looks at, how they look at white sharks, and contrast that with different countries about how in a landlocked country, how do the children there see sharks? Is it different? Where as opposed to the children we spoke to in False Bay and in the Cape area, they live alongside these sharks. So is their perception any different? So I'm really interested to do a piece around like future generations again.
Yeah.
And how they perceive sharks in general, but specifically white sharks. So, but speaking of children, this little thing called children came along. Since we shot Great White Shark Legend, obviously we've been married and had children, and that basically puts everything on hold for a few years.
Right.
So I think we're at the point now where 100% I want on the agenda to go out there and do a follow-up piece.
What I'd love to see is actually, and I'm sure a lot of our members would as well, how when you walk through your post-it note, for your forest of post-it notes, I mean, that would be I'd love to see that clip one day of how you actually conceptualized everything and put it all together.
But I'll certainly put that up as a clip. Which really leads into the next section, which is in terms of getting close to great white sharks, which is what you do. We need to test those fears. It makes people test those fears. So I really want to do a section on fear of sharks. Why do we fear sharks? Sharks compared to other predators. Why do we not look at lions or tigers in the same way? Rachel often hit the nail on the head, points out they don't have the cuddly side. You could show a majestic lion or lion cubs. You can't really show that side of a great white. Well, you can show that side of a great white because that's what we're going to do. But that's not how it's normally looked at. There's no flip side to it. There's no
Disney film about Simba.
No, there's no Disney film about a little great white shark. It's probably never going to happen. But we really want to get into the psychology of why we fear sharks and maybe even fear the ocean in some respects. This is where some of the guest thoughts will come into it as well, and we'll try and get interviews with the guests and so on. Maybe even with myself and Rachel, because we went out there fascinated with sharks, but having a real fear of. You get out there, what are we getting into? So we're going to talk about the fear versus the reality. So this whole section on fear of sharks will be a little bit more psychological, a little bit more sort of educational. The transition to which into the next section is basically all those fears justified, okay? Which leads us into what's it actually like living alongside great white sharks. Fascinatingly enough, to see the topics we wanted to discuss and then to get like your words and Alison and Rob and Gary and all these and Brandon. Brandon, okay, here's a lesson in filmmaking. So we've got all these people lined up for this film. One of the crucial people I wanted was Brandon Kilbride.
Yes.
We'd line him up. I really wanted Brandon. And Rachel had said we should really have him because he was a surfer and he worked on cage diving boats. And part of the controversy around cage diving, as many will know, is how the surfing community can view cage diving. We've had it even recently with our last episode of this podcast with the amazing Dave Pearson of the Bike Club, who's Australian guy who talks about his trauma and experiences and support he gives others for shark bite survivors. Even he's anti-cage diving, talked about it very openly. I'm very pro-cage diving. But I understand why a lot of the surfing community are maybe anti-cage diving. And he said the same sentiments. Well, it's conditioning sharks. It's bringing sharks into the area. I personally don't agree with that. I think it does maybe depend on where you are and who the operators are and so on. But I can understand if there's cage diving operations right slap bang next in eye distance of where surfers are surfing. I can see why there's an issue with some surfing, but Brandon straddled both of those worlds, and I just had to have it. It is the narrative in a large part of the second half of the film just relied on that split view of cage diving and surfing. It was a big one of the topics we wanted to discuss.
Yeah.
Especially seeing as when we tried to get back in for the film, we had surf companies, surf brands, and other companies like, let's say some high-profile energy drinks companies who were also doing a lot with surfing videos at the time and promoting within surfing. So many of them dropped out because of the potential backlash that we're going to get from surfers about cage diving. So I had to have Brandon. He just straddled both of these worlds, and I needed to see both sides of that from one person. And he's very good on camera, and he's very talkative, and knows his stuff.
He was also his kayak was bitten by a shark.
That's right. You covered that in your book, I believe. You had a piece on that in your book.
He survived that as well, and he surfs with great whites. He used to work with great whites out there as well. Yet he still went surfing.
Yep.
And for me, that is somebody who truly understands that sharks have a place in the ocean, and that's why I really I'm so I was so excited that you had him as a feature in your movie as well, which I think really brings it all together very good.
When I was maybe around 10, 11 years old, my mom bought me my first book, which was Sharks and Rays. I think instantly from that day on, I was flabbergasted by sharks. I loved it, whether it be the smallest little cat shark that you see when you're diving at Scaly's Pool, or you see the big great whites jumping at Seal Island. They've all got the same passion for me now.
When you're entering their home, it's like going to the Kruger and wanting to walk around with lions. You don't get many people wanting to do that. So by going for a surf and stuff like that, you're always taking a risk by just putting your feet in the water even. You're taking a risk of going into their home. You don't know where they are, but you do know that they're in the ocean somewhere.
And a lot of people are scared of white sharks, but you can't live your life in fear. You got to go out there, enjoy it, and face it.
But from a very behind the scenes point of view, to just explain how, especially low budget filmmaking works, I'd got Brandon secured. He's like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna be free. I'm still gonna be in the Cape Town area, and so that's great. It's fantastic. And he was going to be one of our sort of first interviews, and let's line it up. So I'm sat with Rachel in the airport in Heathrow, come down from the north of England. We're sat in Heathrow waiting for a connecting flight, just using the last chance I get on my Wi-Fi to check some messages. And there's Brandon on a Facebook message. Bad news. I've picked a job up in the Maldives, working as a dive master on a boat in the Maldives. All right, that's cool. Good work. When are you going? Yeah, that's the thing. I'm going tomorrow. I'm like, oh, come on, no. This guy's crucial to my narrative.
Yeah.
Well, what can we do? How can we make it work? And I spent about an hour back and forth on Facebook messages, lining up Brandon. How could we make this work? And we got the plan down with the timings that we landed in Cape Town. We had to get the rental car, get the luggage and everything, head over to the apartment we were going to, who we were renting off a couple of people we'd stayed with before in a guest house. And they said, we've got an apartment you can use, and we're going to get all our gear set up there, and it's going to be great. But we had literally to get there, get the bags into the house, get the camera gear ready. We had half an hour, and then Brandon's down at the bottom phoning me saying, I'm here, we need to go, we need to do this interview now, I've got to go in a few hours. We're jet lagged, we're so tired, but we had to just pick the gear up, go to a place where we could do an interview. Thankfully, we'd done all the preparation we needed about what we needed to ask this guy. So we did about 2 hours of an interview, and then he said, let's go to a surf spot. We'll go and we'll get a bit of surfing footage. I'm like so exhausted at this time. And thankfully I was, because part of that going surfing after the interview, we went to a little spot in, I think it was Scarborough, near Simonstown.
Mm-hmm.
And he took us to this little surf spot. And at the time I'd got backing from GoPro. One of the backers for the film who put some resources and backing to us was GoPro. And they'd supplied me with tons of cameras and wanted me to shoot certain things on GoPro cameras. Now this was when I think it was when the Hero 4 black camera had just come out, like literally just come out. And I'd got a very good relationship going with GoPro, and they'd sent me a whole bunch of cameras to go and shoot with. But I'd said, okay, we've got Brandon for this such short amount of time. Let's strap the latest GoPro camera. We can shoot in like 2K, I think it was at the time, high frame rate, and stick it on the front of his surfboard. So we did that, and we rushed out, and we stick this brand new GoPro on that's literally just come out. And he goes surfing, there's hardly any waves. So it's like, okay, forget it. We're not going to get big wave surfing, but we'll see you on a surfboard on a GoPro. It'll work. It's good B-roll footage, and it'll fit in. And he's out there for about 10 minutes paddling around, trying to catch a few waves, and then starts walking out the water with the most dejected look on his face, like something's wrong. and he's trying to motion something to me, and I don't know what he's saying, but we're back on the beach with the other camera filming, and he's pointing to the board, and what he was telling me is that this brand new, nice, shiny GoPro that had just been released and we got from GoPro to go and use had popped off his surfboard, and he couldn't find it. No, this is day one. I mean, not only day one, literally 2 hours. We've been here 2 hours. We're exhausted. We've got to go film this thing. And now we've just lost the best GoPro camera that we've got. And the whole deal with GoPro is that they wanted me to shoot certain things on like their latest camera.
Right.
And he's just lost it in the water.
Right. That's a shame.
It's like nightmare. This is an absolute nightmare. And oh, bless him. I still joke about to him this day. He looked so dejected and embarrassed, and he just like, there's nothing he could do. And he's about to piss off to the Maldives on some nice fancy cruise ship, you know. Yeah. And here's me. You've just ruined my film. Thanks, mate. You know, you've just lost my nice camera.
Yeah.
Fortunately, I was that tired. I'd put the wrong camera on his board, and I'd actually put one of the older models on. So I didn't know this until after. Once we got back feeling like crap, because like, oh, that was such an amazing interview, but now, okay, where can I need to get on with GoPro and see if they can get me out one of these new cameras again. And it was only through searching through the bags and getting all the gear back out of the apartment, I realised that actually we'd put the wrong camera on his board anyway, so we still had the good one. But if there's ever a lesson in, you know, frantic filmmaking and guerrilla style filmmaking, it was the worst start we could possibly, and the best start, because we got a fantastic interview with him.
Yes.
And he just sells that whole shark thing on film.
And Seal Island is very special. It's very shallow on the one side, very deep on the other side, and the sharks are just so sneaky. They camouflage. You can't see down on a white shark from a depth, you know, and this is why they hunt at Seal Island, because they've got that advantage on the seals. They can come at 40, 50 k's an hour, and that seal last minute, if he sees it, he'll get away, but otherwise, he's breakfast. Strong, powerful, graceful in how they swim, how they catch their prey. They are deadly animals, you know, they can kill you, but they're not there to kill you, they're not looking to kill you. If, my personal opinion, which I tell everybody, if white sharks wanted to kill humans, they could kill a human being every single day. There would be an attack every single day if you were their prime target, but you're not. Those lovely little seals which are swimming around Seal Island with all the fat and all the blubber, that's what they're after.
And it's the way they get those seals that is spectacular. Breaching.
Each breach is different, you know, although you get different types of breaches, you know, surface breaches, and you get your Polaris breach and these nice aerial breaches. It's never the same. It's every occasion is special, every occasion is unique. There's been times out there, you know, where you don't get breaches, and there's times that you get a lot of breaches. But any special time, I would say, is yes, when you get these breaches that are less expected. Like we have been reeling in the decoy, we didn't expect a breach, and then all of a sudden this magnificent Polaris breach happens right in front of you. Like totally out of the blue. Everybody's like given up. We've towed the decoy for 40 minutes and nothing's happened. And all of a sudden it just like pops up.
To really start to understand the great white shark, you need to get close. And to get close and get informed, we needed the input of the one man who practically put False Bay on the map for white shark breaching behaviour. The man who knows these sharks in this area better than anyone else. The legendary Rob Lawrence.
It's an amazing documentary that you guys did, and for me, it's always been the true message of what we wanted to actually embody in terms of what a great white shark's all about. And as you say so elegantly in the movie, it's not about the gashing of teeth and the blood and the churned up water and the tail slapping and the shark rushing in with his mouth open. It's so much more, and that's why I simply loved when you put that out and I saw some of the first clips of Great White Shark Legend. I was just blown away. I loved the approach to it. I think also the cinematography on it. I know you complain about it because there's more newer stuff about it, but it was really great, and it still is great. I still reckon it's one of the best documentaries that I believe that should be seen.
Wow.
I'd really like to get more people to see this. It's just like the same thing with cage diving. People always complain about cage diving, but the people's attitudes and perceptions that have changed post cage diving. And I've been on I don't know, countless trips on cage dive trips. You have a person going out with one mindset, you have a completely different person coming back, after they've cage dive, and it's all about sharks and how can we conserve them. And your movie really shows that different aspect from sharks, through your interviews, through your footage. I just really believe it's something that is way, way, way underrated, and I wish we could get it out there more to be seen and really bring it out there. So I'd like you to tell everybody, where can we get a copy of your movie?
Hey, this is great. This is a legitimate plug. Normally I'm saying a little cheeky plug at the beginning of these episodes. I made this film, I tell you. So this is a legitimate one. It's an old piece, but we recently just put it out onto Amazon Video. So if you're in the UK or the US, you can see that on Amazon streaming services. You don't even have to be like an Amazon Prime member or anything. You can just go to Amazon, type Great White Shark Legend, and if you can get access to the US or UK streaming services, you will see it there. Alternatively, it's on Vimeo. So if you you can go to the website, greatwhitesharklegend.com, or you can just go to Vimeo, kind of like an alternate to YouTube, and they run a great on-demand service. It's on Amazon and it's on Vimeo, so no matter what your outlet, you can see it. But I just want to pick up on something you said there, because one of the early things when we started putting some trailers out, Dirk, you've picked up on this more than anybody else I know, and I thank you so much for it, was the music that we used, because I was so conscious about using a different kind of music. I mean, even to the point, like when I've done some work for Corner Rob, and I'm sure they won't mind me telling this, I've submitted some work to them before about, because like when we came back, we did a little piece for GoPro, and we put like essentially like a day on a cage diving boat, a little piece together, and it's been their most successful little piece that we've ever put out there. So I think it's about 65,000 views at the minute, which for for their operation, that's some good numbers. But even they sometimes would listen to my music choices and go, I love it, but I'm not so sure about the music. And with White Shark Legend, I really, really wanted to focus on a different kind of music. So I wanted to ask you, what was it about, because you've always said that you love the music in the film, what was it about that approach to the music particularly that you picked up on?
Well, at first it wasn't your stereotypical White Shark music, with the dramatic, sounds that, the impending doom. It was more something that I just could connect with. It wasn't that, again, it bust the stereotypical view of white sharks, which I think has got me interested in the first place. I just enjoyed it. It kind of drew me in, and I wanted to see what this was all about, and it relaxed me actually to actually look into this. And I felt good when I was watching it, because the music complemented the theme, and it also complemented the whole outlook that you were trying to present about how white sharks are being perceived and how they really are. The music, I think, is nearly an emotional, ethereal connection with the topic. It can certainly sway either way. I mean, if you were to tune in the Jaws music, you would have flashbacks of Jaws and all those ghastly scenes versus the music that you chose. And I know that you compose some music as well, and you write in music as well, so you could have a great understanding about the whole emotion that people feel when they experience music together with the visual message that you portrayed in the movie.
Well, some of that came from something you said, because we used this line in a trailer in your interviews, because the way I kind of edited the film when we came back, and again I kind of stole this approach from the Riding Giants director, was to transcribe everybody's interview, like everything word for word, which is not a quick, easy task, especially, with you guys with the South African accents, because you can't hit that button that Adobe does this nice little thing now where it can recognize and do speech recognition. This was early days. You didn't get any of that. So I literally had to hand transcribe every single word that you guys said, so that I've got that in my editing software. And if I want to pull a topic up, I can pull a topic up and say surfing, and here's all the clips that mention surfing. Really good way of doing a documentary. But one of the things that you said, and it was a line that we used in the trailer, was about Seal Island. You talked about it being a primal place.
Yes.
And you'd used a line about, the almost like the sharks are like the gladiators and the seals are like it's like this really kind of like epic gladiator sort of arena, you described it. But you said a line, and you said something about Seal Island, and I'm going to quote my own from that. I believe you said, when you're out there, it's like, this place has been here for millions of years and it's a magical place. When I heard that, and the way you were describing Seal Island, that was a real spark for a certain type of music. We need something very cinematic, epic, gladiatorial, just something of the ages, something very primal. So you probably don't know that, but your words in that little piece of that interview were really a driver for the type of music that we should go with,
Wow.
I should give you credit for that. I'm going to have to pay you now. I don't know.
That's amazing. I didn't realize that my words had such an impact on the creation of the theme and so forth that you created with it.
It's a magical place. And when I go out there, I also always realize how old this place is too. It's been there for millions of years. And this interaction that's happening between the sharks and the seals has happened there for countless of years before us.
No, people have a fear, but it's the fear of the unknown a little bit maybe as well, that they know it, they've heard these stories, they don't know what's true, what's not true. Having a bit of mystique and mystery is probably good. Man's tamed pretty much everything in the world. White sharks are one of the last things they haven't managed to tame, keep in a zoo. It'd be good to have a good mystery out there still.
Everything that you learned about white sharks, what I'd read in books, what I'd seen on the TV, what I'd heard people say, I just realized how much they didn't know.
Dirk, I have quoted your words from that interview so many times, and Alison and Rob.
Yeah.
There's so much, amazing things that were said about white sharks that resonated. I cannot tell you the amount of conversations, interviews. I've had this film shown at some schools before. I've used so many lines that I've just ripped you guys off in conversations and stolen your words. But that's testament to your guys' knowledge about that area and those sharks,
And I think we speak from passion as well. I mean, Rob has a lot of passion, and that's really imbued by the people that you've interviewed as well. Is the passion that they have for the animals, for conserving these particular sharks as well, and all sharks and in the ocean in general. It's just amazing that I was really grateful that you put this movie together. For the sake of portraying sharks in a completely different light, and I still recommend that your documentary is definitely a must see. I mean, you can give me all the National Geo and the Discovery Channel's one with which are nice, they're great, they're nice shots and everything like that. But in the end,
they look amazing. They look fantastic.
But at the end of the day, I'd rather want something that actually educates me on sharks, and this is what I've been missing in all these other shows that we see. I don't see any education or very little education. That's what I'm missing, and that's why you bring something out there that is truly educational, and it reflects the true habitat and behavior of the white shark, as opposed to the one that's created for ratings and for headlines. And that's the real difference. And that's why just like I recommend everybody to go cage diving, because it's just going to change your attitude and your perception about white sharks. The same thing I say, you've got to go and watch this movie. It'll sum up the changes of perceptions that are so important to be able to conserve the species.
I super appreciate that, you were helping to sort of promote this and for a while, but it's very frustrating because every year when Shark Week comes out, we've got 48,000 members now on our group, and everybody always says the same thing. Oh man, it looks great and all. Yeah, it's really, really tough. I really wish we could get back to some of the education about sharks.
Yeah.
And the whole time I'm sat here screaming like, well, go watch my flipping film.
Yeah.
It's there. You have to balance that because I've got a very personal connection with the film, but you have to balance it with how people access media now. To get somebody to even sit and watch an hour and a half, an hour 35 documentary, not many people want to do that anymore. The nature of how we access media has changed. If you're not hooked within 10 seconds of watching a video, you've scrolled past it and it's gone. And Facebook know this, YouTube know it, it's in all the algorithms for Instagram, Twitter, everybody. People scroll past it, and the second that you don't see it, you've lost them. They've gone. They're never going to get that pushed in front of them again.
Yeah.
I understand how social media and how video is accessed these days, and it is very different to what it used to be. But by the same account, it's like, I know it's my film and Rachel's film, but there's a film that I think you will get something out of if you're frustrated with the kind of some of the nonsense we get on Shark Week every year.
Yeah, and this is not a plug. This is like a real genuine, because I really enjoy the work that you've done, and I think it's so important that more and more people see this. And again, this is not just a plug for you. I just believe in your product, and I believe in what you've created.
Thank you.
Is really something that people need to see, and I hope that more and more people will actually start tuning into the more realistic perceptions of white sharks. And this is again what we portrayed, and the people that, in your film that spoke about it, obviously have that experience with these sharks, and that we start bringing education back. And that's why I'm really looking forward to your sequel to this, to see that also the next generation taking the torch going forward and conserving and protecting these sharks with the same passion that the generation that you filmed in your movie, with the same passion and conviction going forward to protect these amazing animals.
I think one of the things that's happened and you really need to sort of stop and recognise your contribution here to this, Dirk. And I mean, appreciate for some people listening, this just might sound like a constant back and forth plug, but this is not. This is genuine passion for what we're speaking about here. I was on the White Shark interest group, at the time that I was making this film. I remember particularly while I was out shooting, I was putting some stills from raw footage, because you get back every day after shooting, really, really long days. It's not a holiday. It's really grueling work to be out there on a boat for so long, and then get off the boat and then go and film loads of other B-roll footage and interviews and go down to Cape Point. And it sounds wonderful, but it's hard work. But I was posting some of the still images every night onto, it was Reddit at the time, a shark group on Reddit, and getting some amazing response and genuinely feeling like having that connection as a filmmaker with an audience before you've even made the film, while you're making it, is amazing. And I was on the White Shark interest group at the time, and I was drawing a lot from the kind of conversations and the debates and how people were talking about white sharks while we were even making the film, like literally out there. So then when we came back and we finished it, and again, I was just a member of the group at the time, I'd reached out to yourself and talked about, can I put a trailer up? Is that cheeky? Do you mind if I put a trailer up? And you were like, go for it, do it, I mean, obviously you were in it, so it was good to have your words coming out, but you were like, yeah, absolutely, promote it. And then somewhere in there, I ended up being an admin on the group as well, with just some remarkable people. The fellow admins on this group are just the passion and experience and knowledge. I mean, I feel like a fraud sometimes, because these guys know way more than I do in terms of like the science and the laws and the ethics and so on. And I'm a guy who made a film because I love sharks. But that period after making the film and then getting more involved with your group, and now ending up, working with those amazing people, fellow admins, and all the members of the group who contribute, that actually has helped change how I then want to go on and make more documentaries and more works on sharks, because I have such a better understanding now than I did when I made that film.
For me, it was, and again, I speak from personal, my personal opinion here is that going out to Seal Island was always an excitement going out there. I think that's also brought up on, about your film when you bring it out there. And, I know you quote me on it being a magical place, but it is a magical place. It's been around there for millions of years. These interactions between seal and shark have happened for, millennia before us. And they will occur, and they will occur for millennia after us. It's just this, like, to be able to be, even for the short period of time in their presence is always a magical moment. It's I think is very, very well captured in your production that you brought out.
One of the people we met on the boat who's in the film is a lady called Gemma. I'm from the north of England. I was living at the time in sort of the Sheffield area of the UK, if any of our UK listeners know that. And then I'm on the boat out there, and you hear an accent, and it's someone from a city called Leeds, which is kind of like just next to Sheffield. So she was terrified. She was petrified about being on the boat. She obviously had a draw to be out there. She actually was out at Seal Island. She ended up, I think she spent a very, very, very short amount of time in the cage, because she was obviously just some, fear was with her.
Mm-hmm.
But that short amount of time she was in the cage didn't matter. It was the time that she spent out at Seal Island, just observing sharks, observing the seals, observing the wildlife, was so magical that alone was enough to sort of change her perception about like that part of the world and what she'd seen about, white sharks. She didn't even need to be spending 5 hours in a cage. It was just being in that place. And again, it's hard to describe, but your words say, oh, it's a magical place. There's something about that piece of water and that land that, I don't know, there's something very, very magical and primal about it. It's very hard to explain.
We're just so fortunate to be able to view this short interaction, in their lives. I mean, they obviously live in the water and it's their home. And I've always said sharks can never infest their own environment because that's where they live. And the same goes for the seals. I mean, they are aware of their sharks. They're acutely aware of the sharks. They obviously use anti-predatory strategies, and you can see that coming through in their behavior, trying to outwit the sharks. But yet they live there, and this is the cycle of life, and it's been like that for millions of years. And it's just it's one of my favorite places in the world. It smells like hell if the wind's in the wrong direction, but
yeah, you certainly know when you're approaching the island, don't you?
Yeah,
and at 5:30 in the morning, not so good on the stomach, eh?
Yeah.
But interesting. But again, Rob's footage he had, Rob's kind of archive of tapes, which are very, very well protected now. I have them here, and they're very well looked after.
Right.
That they just captured years and years and years worth of the island. So in amongst all these, suddenly I'd got 60, 70 breaches on camera, which is just phenomenal. But in amongst all that other stuff was the other stuff going on. It was orcas, it was pods of dolphins, alongside the boat that Rob had shot. It was, just the sunrise, like footage of the sunrise every day over those mountains is phenomenal. It's something you just can't. You have to be there and experience it. And the sky is just vast and open, and the colours every day are different, and the water's acting differently every day. And it doesn't even matter if you don't see a shark. Just the experience of being there is just something else.
Right. Yep.
So that's what we wanted to try and capture on the film. To be fair, that was one of the aims. Can we get even a tenth of what it's actually like to be out there? I think we did all right. I think we captured it as best we could.
Yes, we're a business, and we have a livelihood to make, but it's very much that personal touch and that personal interaction. The fact that we've limited our number of guests to 10 to 12 and haven't gone the big route of having 40 guests on a boat is a huge thing. Another thing that we have Rob, who's been in the shark industry for 20 years, still on almost every single trip, is unheard of in this industry.
Anywhere from like 120 to 130, 140 trips a year. That would more or less be days. Some days we'll do 2 trips, obviously weather impacting us. But it varies. But around, to be on the conservative side, around about 100 days a year we're out interacting with the white sharks.
What about you personally?
Jeez, about 100 days a year.
I think Rob's just happy with the way he is, He doesn't have the need to go out there and be Mr. Cameraman or the big shark man or anything like that.
No, I'm just old Robert. No, I'm not. Just, all these names are not up for me. Shark legends overplayed. There's too many shark legends out there. I'll just be old, plain old Rob thing. So.
It really speaks to what, in my opinion and in my experience, was working with sharks for many, many years. It really portrays the real white shark. That's why Great White Shark Legends is for me one of the best documentaries of all time.
That's some high praise, sir. It doesn't go lightly on me. That is extreme high praise, and I massively appreciate it. I do wonder. It's a shame because all those documentaries that we're talking about, which I don't even think of them as documentaries. They're TV shows. It's reality TV shows. To be fair, they're not documentaries. They don't document anything. They film it. And then they put some captions on and a voiceover track. There's some really good people work on those things. There's some really genuine, shark advocates and some really talented people. Obviously, the quality of the equipment they're using and the skill of those, camera people and divers is second to none. Don't even pretend to be in the same league as those. But one of the things I wanted to get across today and talk about briefly is you don't need to be at that level to go and make a film about sharks or about white sharks. You don't even need to be at the ocean, to be fair. If there's a story to be told, the equipment now and the tools to do the job are so cheap that you don't need to be there. So a good example of that, when we were originally putting together Great White Shark Legend, one of the things that fell by the wayside and what I want to pick up in another piece is about how different countries view white sharks. And I got a guy, particularly over here in the UK, and another guy I had over in France, who basically said that they would assist, and they went out with a camera just interviewing people on the street about sharks. And what I wanted to do was compare people's reactions and about how they spoke. So whether that was, and we used some of it in the film because there's some shots on Muizenberg Beach in South Africa, talking to people about sharks. And then I was going to compare that and contrast it with people from different countries around the world.
Mm-hmm.
But this guy took out with a camera and got so excited about going out talking about sharks with people and their reactions to him. So, I mean, whether it was a guy in his university dorm room where he literally just knocked on the door, opened it and said, "Tell me what you know about white sharks," and they'd got so stoked to talk about them, or people on the streets who were like, "Oh, I've seen Jaws, it's all about the teeth and things." You don't have to be working for some high budgeted production company to make a film. You might be going out just to the ocean looking at small shark species. It doesn't even have to be about grey whites. If there's a story to be told, the tools to do it as a filmmaker now are there. If you have any interest, because a lot of people have said to me like, "Oh, it must be so glamorous going out making a film about sharks." Like, hell no, not at all. It's hard work. And it can cost some money. And we were very fortunate to have the people backing it that we did, like GoPro and like Robert's company. And it doesn't matter if there's a story to be told and there's a story about sharks, go tell it. Doesn't matter whether that's a few people talking to camera or whether you're actually going out on a dive. There's still ways of telling that story and putting a film together. So I'd just encourage anybody who gets involved in that area and wants to know about how you do that on a small scale with a lower budget, go do it, or contact me and I'll tell you how to go do it.
Well, there you go. I mean, now that's an invitation for many to go out there and actually, fulfill some of their passions and their dreams to actually do something like that. And I believe that every piece of film documentary that's being put out there towards this and portraying sharks like that will eventually sway the public opinion more and more. That to see sharks in a different light. The greatest, the greatest accolade I could give to a movie is that it changes people's perception, and that's really what it's all about. We've lived with these perceptions about great white sharks, especially in the media, growing up as a good shark is a dead shark. These perceptions are changing, and even if my mother, who had that kind of perception, and she thought I was absolutely crazy and suicidal, wanted to dive with great white sharks, she thought she's changed her perception. And if somebody who 82 years of age can say, you know what, you're right about your attitude about sharks, and we do need them, that for me is always something great. And this is after seeing documentaries like yourselves, like your documentary, just look at it and say, you know what, you got a point. Anybody who can change your opinion, for me, it's a successful way of gauging the outcome or the success of any production that comes out. And you all speak to this very, very well.
I'm honored just to have any part in a more sort of wider aspect of shark conservation and shark awareness, because funnily enough, after we made the film and we came back and we edited it, GoPro's approach had very much changed by them. Originally we were going to be talking to them about doing more with the film itself, and their brand identity had changed massively by the time we put the film together. And they were like, look, we don't ask for anything back. We gave you everything we gave you for it. But, we don't want to put our name on it because it doesn't fit in with our brand anymore. Unfortunately, that was exactly the same time they started sending me video clips of Ocean Ramsey grabbing on the back of sharks and riding them and going, wow, have you seen what we got on GoPro? We got Ocean Ramsey on a shark. And I'm like, yeah, clearly we are in very different places now.
Right.
Prior to going out shooting it, they were very much like, wow, just the idea of putting a GoPro in front of a great white shark, then not many people were doing it. When we went out and filmed, everybody suddenly, had a GoPro, but no one was really putting the footage out there. And then unfortunately GoPro went that way. But they've been very kind, and I have a very, very good relationship with them since. In fact, we recently just gave a Hero 8 camera away on one of the other podcasts. So if you didn't tune into that, you missed out, because that was on offer. Again, how people are filming sharks now and how accessible it is completely different. The idea that something has to be as dramatic as sticking your camera in the mouth of a great white shark by accident, I might add, doesn't have to be that way. Story. There's got to be a story in it, whether that's a piece of writing or you want to post something on our group, or you've got some old footage you shot while you were on a holiday, cage diving or something. Like you said, every positive piece of footage is going to be out there. So I'm just honored to have some part in that, where there's not actually many people telling that story.
Yeah.
It's not an accessible story for many people, but I like to think if you sit and give it 20 minutes, you'll be hooked, and it is accessible.
Going on Facebook, and when there's like anti-shark finning campaigns, and those are the people that are into sharks, whether they do diving or even if fishermen or whatever, they're the ones that know and interact. The big thing's going to be changing border-based perception. Like the local talk radio shows, the only time they talk about sharks is when there's been a shark attack.
They are predators and they need to be respected for being predators. But they are not man killers or man eaters. And so it's providing information that is balanced and to form a healthy respect and to have a healthy fear of sharks.
It's going to have to start off from a young age group, from the super young guys like Adam and Jordan, and they can tell their friends and that, but it's going to be very hard. I think it's probably going to be generations, because it's going to be hard to sell a message that people don't want to hear.
I've had a member only last week check the film out and came back, messaging me saying exactly what you've been saying. People should see this film, and that sounds quite egotistical, but I'm just honoured to have a part in shark conservation. I'm not making a ton of money off it or anything,
If people made a ton of money out of it, we'd have every Tom, Dick, and Harry, in this world. And I'd rather work with people that are sincere and can speak with conviction and with passion about the experiences. That for me is way much more. And again, thank you for being having me as part of your movie, and for sharing these amazing insights into the filmmaking and the pitfalls and the jubilations of making these films.
That used to be a massive part of my life for a while, was making that movie, but now a massive part of my life on a pretty hourly basis, to be fair, is the White Shark Interest Group on Facebook, which is why we're now doing what we're doing.
I was super tickled also that you did this fantastic intro for us, which also just shows the ability of what you can do is really amazing. So thank you for the intro for the Great White Shark Interest Group too as well.
More than welcome. A pleasure as always. And just a shout out to fellow admins and members. It's nice when we do get together and have a chat on these things and take some time out.
Again, thank you so much, Ricardo, for sharing your insights and your amazing experiences with white sharks and what led you to make this really, really outstanding documentary, The Great White Shark Legends.
Do you want me to jump into the other chair now? Get back to should we turn the table back round?
Yeah.
And
go for it.
So the music will start playing about now if I've done my job properly. So yes, thank you all again to the listeners. These podcasts that we're doing are really starting to get some great feedback, and we really do appreciate everyone of our 48,000 members. Thank you so much for checking this podcast out and being a member of that group. If you're not a member, as I've said before, head over to Facebook, search the White Shark Interest Group, click join, tell us why you want to join the group. And if it's because you heard the podcast, I'm seeing this quite a lot now, people saying heard the podcast and I want to join, absolutely give us a shout out. And you can also find us on Instagram at whiteshark_interest group, where we also put up, as well as the images, we like to include a little bit of facts and knowledge around those images as well. And I would encourage anybody, photographers out on the group, if you want to showcase any of your work, please get in touch and we'll happily feature that on the Instagram page. You can also find us with a lot of very short, quick links to other things on the whitesharkinterestgroup.com website. So I guess I'm supposed to thank you, Dirk. So thank you for your time on turning the tables as well today.
Great, and I'm happy to turn it back over to you again. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so until next time, folks, we will see you on the next episode.